The Nacelle company has announced that they're doing a Star Trek action figure line. Let's talk about it.
It's morphin' time!
Hello, this is Soundout here, and today we're going to be talking about Nacelle Company's Star Trek line. This was just revealed at New York Comic Con. We're going to go over all the details about the line itself, who Nacelle is as a company, my thoughts on it from multiple perspectives, and let's kind of discuss this new line. It's very exciting to get a new Star Trek action figure line. But before we get into that, let me do all the boring YouTube stuff that I need to do to grow the channel. If this is your first time seeing a Star Trek video on this channel, go check out the Star Trek playlist. There's an entire documentary about the Playmates line in there. There's a viewing guide to how to watch Star Trek in chronological order. All kinds of good stuff. Go check out the Star Trek playlist, please. I love doing Star Trek videos, so go check it out if you haven't. And if you aren't already subscribed, please hit subscribe and the notification bell. And please hit the like button if you haven't already, because that'll help this video get out to more people, as well as tell me that you want to see more Star Trek videos from me. So let's just get into the meat of the topic here. There is a brand new toy line for Star Trek that was announced by the Nacelle company. And I wanted to talk about this in a video format, even though I usually cover news topics on my live streams. In fact, we talked about this on this week's live stream. If you want like kind of a more casual flow discussion between me and my co-hosts on those streams, as well as the live chat, we had a very interesting discussion. It's in there. There is a chapter marker for the Star Trek news specifically, so you can go jump ahead. But in terms of discussing this in a video format, I thought this would be a great way to kind of get all the information out there that I know of about the line and get my full thoughts on it. And then that way it's easily and accessible for anyone that wants to see it, including hopefully the Nacelle company themselves. They said that they want to see ideas from fans. I hope this video will be something they take a look at, because I got thoughts, both positive and maybe not so positive. And I think that that is a good thing going into a line, especially because they're pretty far out. But I think before we get too far ahead, let's talk about who the Nacelle company is. So the Nacelle company is run by Brian Volk-Weiss, who is part of the film industry and has been for a long time. And the Nacelle company itself started by producing sort of documentary stuff before transitioning into multimedia projects. They do comic books, and of course they do toys, which is where I'll be mostly talking about here, is the toy production side of things. I decided to take a look at Nacelle's portfolio of the toy licenses they've done so far to kind of get an idea of how the Star Trek line will shape up, as well as to get an idea if their figures are any good. So while I will preface this with I haven't owned any Nacelle figures before, I have heard good things about several of these, but I thought let's just break it down in an approximate order they came out in. So first up, they did these Sectars figures. Sectars was an 80s toy brand that had a cartoon. They did the two of the main characters in a 7-inch scale, very retro inspired, for about 40 bucks a piece. I heard good things about those overall. I heard they were a little weird, but it was Nacelle's first toy outing, so understandable for sure. They only ever made one wave of these, but at least it was two of the main characters. Their next big thing was RoboForce, another revived old toy brand. They did two characters in wave 1 that were 7-inch scale and $50 a piece. They have done a version, there's a version 2 of one of them coming out. I don't know exactly if there's going to be future waves of this, but they look pretty cool. Honestly, I didn't hear anything about those personally. The thing I did see a big splash on was Biker Mice from Mars, which was another toy property that had a cartoon, and these are more cartoon-inspired figures based on the show, which I think is really cool. And these apparently have popped up at Walmart's even, so they're not just online exclusives. 7-inch scale, $35. Figures come with a lot of accessories, good range of articulation, and they even made the bikes, which are $46 a piece, so you can actually have your Biker Mice on your bikes. So it's pretty cool. I've heard really good things about the Biker Mice figures, so I would kind of take this as a good sign of quality from Nacelle. Their next big line they're launching is Wild West Cowboys from Moo Mesa. Wave 1 is kind of interesting. So with Biker Mice, tracking to that for a moment, the first wave was the three main characters from Biker Mice from Mars, the titular Biker Mice. With Cowboys from Moo Mesa, they have one main character, one supporting character, and one villain character. So kind of mixing up the lineup, and that's for Wave 1. Those are also 7-inch scale and $35 a piece, based again on the cartoon Cowboys of Moo Mesa. With Biker Mice and with Cowboys, I've never experienced either franchise, nor have I ever bought the toys. They're just not in my wheelhouse for whatever reason, despite all the Masters of the Universe and Transformers Ninja Turtles behind me. But I haven't experienced any of those personally, but I thought it was kind of interesting that the Biker Mice was like, let's just get the main characters out there, whereas the Cowboys were sort of mixing up the field of one main, one supporting, and one villain, because I think that kind of adds for my diverse toy line. Now, the line I wanted to bring up that would be the closest to Star Trek would be The Expanse. This is a science fiction series, very character-focused, a lot of the way that Star Trek is done. Hasn't had a ton of merchandise despite its long run on streaming, though I think it ended. I also don't follow The Expanse. Now, Nacelle made 8 figures in the first wave. They launched it as a Kickstarter first, which was successful and did get its funding. These are listed as 1/12 scale, but I can't figure out if that is 6-inch size, which is true 1/12, or 7-inch size, which is collector 1/12. A lot of lines will say it's 1/12 scale, and it'll be 7 inches, which isn't quite 1/12 scale. So I'm not exactly sure on the scale on these. These are $39 a piece on the Nacelle website. I don't know if that's because they're Kickstarter or because of the licensing cost, but these were 7 main characters and then 1 villain character. And yes, I did look that up. So if I'm wrong about somebody being a main character, this is Wikipedia told me the 7 people here were main cast and that one glowy guy is a villain. So that's the furthest research I did on The Expanse. But I think it's kind of interesting that with a lot of these lines, one of the big things is that, you know, with Biker Mice and with Expanse, they got majority of the main cast done in the first wave. And with Cowboys, they sort of mixed it up a little bit. But that's kind of where we're at. I also want to point out with the Expanse figures, I'm very interested in the accessory loadouts because here's a character who doesn't seem to be a combatant character. She seems to be more of like, you know, commander, operations, kind of desk person, and she still comes with a heck of a lot of accessories, which is good, especially for Star Trek, because how many admirals we see that just sit behind desks that have cool things on them. So one of the things I want to talk about next is who I am as a Star Trek fan, because I think that establishing where one's personal biases comes from is good for videos talking about industry and business, as well as talking about personal opinion. You need to know where I'm coming from as a Star Trek fan. I am a Star Trek fan who was raised by Star Trek fans. I have known Star Trek my entire life. I started watching it several years ago. I have seen every single episode of Star Trek, every movie, and a bunch of these things twice or 3 times. I'm the kind of guy that will jump at any Star Trek merchandise that pops up, hence the Moopsie. The thing with me in Star Trek is that it's very close to my heart. I love it dearly, and anything Star Trek that's new will excite me, and I will always try it out. So because of that, I have to approach the topic of Star Trek toys in 2 senses. We're going to first talk about the toys, and I'm going to approach this from my fan perspective, hence the Star Trek Adventure hat from Universal Studios that I got from my mom. This is me in fan perspective. I will switch hats to business perspective later, because I think it'd be kind of fun to talk about this in 2 ways, because that's kind of what I've looked at this line, is what's my initial fan reaction, and what is covering the toy industry on YouTube for 15 years told me about this line. So we're going to do this in 2 parts. But let's take a look at what Nacelle has as a lineup, what they showed at New York Comic Con, and talk about each figure one at a time to kind of get an idea of what this line is going to be like. So first things first, shout out to TrekCore. They wrote a full article, I'll link it below, about what was revealed at New York Comic Con. It's where I'm pulling all my info from. They seem to have a nice, concise source. I also know that several of the TrekCore writers are toy collectors, so it feels like the appropriate place to pull information from. So first things first, Brian Volk-Weiss confirmed that they have the license for the original series through Enterprise, as well as movies from Motion Picture through Nemesis. So they basically have everything that was pre-Kelvin timeline. We know that Hia Toys is doing Kelvin timeline stuff, and it's kind of interesting because this implies that somebody's got the license for Discovery onward, but we haven't seen anybody pop up recently since Playmates stopped doing Star Trek stuff. So it's kind of an interesting thing. This is going to be just all your classic stuff, your 1966 to your 2004-ish, and that's going to be the initial lineup. One of the big things mentioned is not repeating the same lineup of characters we always see with every single Star Trek line, and I think that's great. One of the failings of Playmates' recent toy line was that the first wave was 6 characters we see all the time, and the Discovery characters they picked were the ones that had already gotten multiple pieces of merchandise at the point and not anything interesting and new, and we never saw a second wave of Playmates' live-action Star Trek figures. So, well, that's kind of a good thing to go with something lesser known. The interesting part, too, is the article mentions, and I saw this in discussions with people who were at the show, we're not exactly sure if these are 6-inch or 7-inch. I am kind of leaning towards I hope they're 6-inch, but we will talk about that more in the business section. The 6-inch to 7-inch, it makes sense because everything Nacelle has made prior has been basically 7-inch. So let's go through figure by figure and talk about who the character is and if I think they're a good fit for this line. Keep in mind that I already have decided I want all 8 figures. This is just wave 1. I will buy all of these. 100%. These are figures I want to get, and I'd like to cover them on the channel as well. Figure number 1 is Captain Jellicoe. So Captain Jellicoe was in a famous Next Generation 2-parter called Chain of Command. He temporarily commanded the Enterprise D. It's a pretty famous episode overall, and he's in a memorable guest star being played by Ronnie Cox. The other cool part about Jellicoe is he appeared in Star Trek Prodigy as Admiral Jellicoe, and was in several episodes. I don't think he had as much screen time as he did in TNG, but he appeared in more episodes of Prodigy than he did TNG. And that means he's got a bit of a legendary status, plus some recency bias that I think, is make him a great pick. He's an iconic guest star, and I think that, it's kind of just TNG guy with a new head, but it's kind of a nice way to start it off. I also like that you can see he's got double jointed elbows and knees, thigh swivels, like the full range of articulation you'd see from something like Marvel Legends. When Star Trek characters aren't known for high karate kicks or anything, I like having that articulation because it helps you stabilize and balance the figure out. Figure number 2, Peter Preston. So this is one of those characters, like I said, I've seen every Star Trek thing ever. I didn't know he had a name. This is one of those characters that is famous for a famous scene. It's the scene where he dies, tragically, and Scotty's carrying him in his arms from Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. He's sort of there to up the stakes of what is going on in The Wrath of Khan. Because of this, he's an iconic character. We also learned, if you watch the director's cut, that he's Scotty's nephew. But other than that, there's not really much notoriety to the character, and while I'm interested in buying it, I wonder how many others are. Though when I talked about my live stream, some non-Trekkies were like, that's a cool guy in a spacesuit. So hey, that's a good design to work with. Figure number 3 is Valkyris. She was from Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. She was Commander Kruge's girlfriend. Another ill-fated character. Never had a toy before. Same with Jellicoe and same with Peter Preston. Had to look again for his name. This is the 3rd character in a row that have never had toys before. Valkyris, though, I do think is a little bit lesser known, but she has a Klingon, and Klingon designs usually sell as good figures. It would be nice to see a Commander Kruge to go with her in the future, and I hope that that's in the plans. Figure number 4 is a very smart choice, Captain Rachel Garrett. So Captain Rachel Garrett appeared in yesterday's Enterprise as the captain of the Enterprise C. Just realized this is another ill-fated character. However, Rachel Garrett has kind of a legendary status, being the captain of an Enterprise, and the Enterprise C being quote-unquote the Lost Enterprise because it only appeared in that TNG episode, kind of gives her some legendary status. There was a statue of the character in Picard Season 3 that was one of the plot points, and Rachel Garrett is going to be in the upcoming Section 31 movie. So I think this is a really good choice. While she didn't have as much screen time as maybe some other characters, I think that because she's in Section 31, because she has a bit of legendary status, and she is a captain of Enterprise, that's a really good pick for a figure. Now, figure number 5 is one of those things I like to call meme status. Tuvix. Tuvix was a transporter accident between Tuvok and Neelix. They ended up fusing together into one. And because it was Voyager, at the end of the episode, they had to be unfused. And people have debated for a long time if Janeway was in the right to unfuse Tuvix. Because Tuvix was honestly just a separate being. It wasn't like a Gogeta situation where Goku and Vegeta became one person and then they're like shared consciousness. Tuvix was a separate being on the end of the day. Lower Decks did a great send-up to Tuvix in their most recent season, Season 4. And Tuvix has had sort of a legendary status because of the debate around the episode. How many people want to buy a Tuvix? We'll talk about that in the business section, but I'll buy Tuvix. I'm the kind of Star Trek fan that would. Figure number 6 is a little personally annoying, but I will still probably pick it up because I'm sure we'll get another one later. It's Mirror Archer. This is Captain Archer from the Mirror Universe in the Enterprise 2-parter that took place entirely in the Mirror Universe. Really cool episode. He's seen here in the picture, because there's no picture of the figure, but this is, I assume, the costume he'll be in, which is in the green tunic from TOS because of everything involving the Defiant. If you haven't seen that 2-parter, it's a really good one. That is really cool to get a new Archer figure because of all the main captains from Star Trek, the order of merchandise pretty much goes Kirk and Picard get the most, Cisco gets some, Janeway gets like barely any, and then Archer has gotten almost nothing. There's the really cool XO6 Archer, but that's 1/6 scale, and that's like a full-on collectible. And then the only other Archers we got besides that were the ones by Diamond Select Toys through their Art Asylum brand during the run of Enterprise. And while this is a nicely sculpted Archer figure, this guy has a rubber crotch so he can sit in chairs, except his legs spring back because it's a rubber crotch. I would love a non-rubber crotch Archer. I think, you know, even going with the style of let's do things that are lesser made, a regular Archer is also lesser made. So I hope that Mirror Archer means that we will get a regular Archer later because, and also honestly everybody from Enterprise, because they've never had a proper set of figures. Like everybody from Enterprise was either made in the blue jumpsuit or in the copper EV suit, but like some of them got made both, Archer, T'Pol, and I think Trip, and then everybody else was one or the other, which is, I think, ridiculous because, I mean, Diamond Select had the license while Enterprise was on, and we didn't get a complete set. If there's anything I want out of Nacelle's line, it's a complete set of Enterprise characters in the same uniform design. Figure number 7, my favorite reveal by far, Wei Yun from DS9. Played by Jeffrey Combs, this was probably the longest role he had on DS9, one of the most iconic villains, and it's one of the figures that many people asked, why didn't Playmates make this? We had the Jem'Hadar, but we didn't have any Vorta, specifically Wei Yun. Wei Yun is one of the legendary guest star characters from DS9. Absolutely wonderful pick to throw in here. I think this is a perfect choice, no complaints. Also, people who love Jeffrey Combs will probably pick this up. So all your Reanimator fans, all your Transformers fans, all your DC fans are like, that's Jeffrey Combs? I gotta get another figure of Jeffrey Combs. I mean, you know, you got to build up a Jeffrey Combs figure collection. It's almost possible, and we don't have many of his Star Trek appearances for some reason, and so Wei Yun is a perfect pick in my opinion. And then figure number 8, rounding out Wave 1, is the heavy hitter of the wave, Captain Sulu. Amazing choice here. So Sulu has gotten a lot of toys, yes, but there was only one figure of him in the Monster Maroon uniform from the movies, which was the Diamond Select one that was Commander Sulu. They didn't do Captain Sulu from Star Trek 5, 6, and that one Voyager episode. Getting Captain Sulu is a great thing in this line. I absolutely love this idea. That is something I wish that there was more of in this wave. We'll talk about this in the business, where you have a heavy hitter character like Sulu, but in a look that we hardly ever get or never get. That is what I'm looking for here, and that is a great choice as well. Also, here is prototype shots of Captain Garrett, Captain Jellicoe, and Scotty's dead nephew. They were on display at New York Comic-Con. The figures themselves are said to be going up for pre-order in early 2025 to ship in fall 2025. So I'm hoping that with this very long lead time in reveal to release, that some of the fan input can be taken into this, because I like what I'm seeing. As a fan, I'm 100% on board. The thing is, when I talk about stuff on this channel, and I can't help it, but it's one of my things, sometimes you got to take the fan hat off and put the business hat on, and let's talk about this as a toy line that's going to be mass marketed. So let's talk about what I've noticed from a business perspective about the line so far and some concerns I have. Now, it's not to say that anybody at the Nacelle company hasn't thought of these things. I'm sure they have thought all these things through. They're professionals. They make toys. But I feel like I want to share these things just in case they haven't, or just in case other people have other ideas on different ways this could be approached. I just have some thoughts and I want to share them. And once again, it's not that I say I know how to run a toy company, but I've been covering toy companies and toy lines for a very long time on this YouTube channel, and I am looking at the overall picture of Star Trek and toys in 2024. So let's talk about some things I have. Okay, first things first, I think the question does come up, is it too obscure for casual audiences? Because the thing is that when it comes to the 6-inch scale lines, this is the scale built by Marvel Legends. And Marvel Legends will go from everything from Moon Knight to Bloodstorm, the alternate universe version of Storm who's a vampire. Yeah, it gets pretty obscure in Marvel Legends. One of the things Marvel Legends did was they had the Build-A-Figure thing, so that way the more obscure characters could get sold by more popular characters, because you need to have the stores refill the case of figures to get the more popular characters there. And then also for fans, if you wanted to finish a Build-A-Figure, you had to pick up a couple people you probably never heard of before. Nothing like that exists for Star Trek, though if they are in case assortments, a heavy hitter could sell a case of figures. But that depends on how the distribution side of the line is going to go. One of the things we've noticed with Star Wars Black Series, which is another sci-fi franchise that has a 6-inch line, is that the more obscure characters tend to shelf warm, or even the popular characters that are overproduced. There's, people have talked about how there's too many Landos at their stores, or for me, too many Mandos. I've seen so many versions of The Mandalorian shelf warm because they seem like my Target seemed to get a whole case of 8 of them, and there's so many Mandos on the market, that market is satisfied and filled. And then there's guys like Admiral Akbar, where they released them twice within the same year in different packaging, and so you can get them on sale. Both these lines, I think, have kind of ups and downs in terms of 6-inch figures, and they run $25 at Hasbro. These are said to be about $30. 30 sounds great. I think that actually helps with accessibility because 25 to 30 seems to be the kind of casual collector pickup in a figure this size. Now, where this could get thrown off a little bit is if they are 7-inch scale. So I was thinking about, they talk about filling gaps, but there's not really a 6-inch Star Trek line. There was a 7-inch one from Diamond Select over 20 years ago. We'll talk about that more in a moment, but those were definitely larger than standard 6-inch figures that a lot of people collect. And I've noticed that with lines like McFarlane Toys, where they do a really large 7.5-inch scale, and some other companies, once you get out of that 6-inch range and they don't look like they go next to each other, a lot of the casual interest drops off and it only becomes the people that want to collect that line. Okay, so let me talk about fitting into an existing collection. Because a lot of these picks, like I mentioned, are first-time figures for these characters. I think all of them, all 8 figures have never had Star Trek toys before, which I think is fantastic. That's fan hat, 100% fantastic. But also fan hat, still a little business hat. What am I going to put these with? If they're 6 to 7 inches, the only line they would fit with is Diamond Select's old Star Trek line, which, you had Archer, right? Rubber Hips Archer. I have Evie Suit T'Pol, because I found her at a comic shop. And I have Khan from Wrath of Khan. I don't, as deep into Star Trek as I am, these are the only Diamond Select figures I own. Also, with how good the Nacelle figures look, they're not going to look good with this Khan. This Khan looks his age. He's not as detailed. He doesn't have as good of a likeness. His articulation's a lot more limited. And it's also something where I think a company trying to match the scale of an older company, it never works out the way that it's intended. Even Hasbro making like Kenner Star Wars style figures again, they're not exactly the same thing because there's so much time put between it. And like I said, the Nacelle figures just look so much better than Diamond Select's old stuff. Plus, if they're aiming to mix it with Diamond Select, you may run into the same issue Playmates did. The Neo Playmates line were 5-inch figures, whereas the old Playmates line were 4.5-inch. So you have situations like this, where the old Playmates figures scale shorter than the new Playmates figures. So on top of remaking a bunch of figures that already existed, so your new figures, like the 2 Discovery figures or the Spock in the Monster Maroon, which we hadn't had in the Playmates line, those didn't blend well with the pre-existing figures. They were close, but they were just off enough to not build on the previous collection. And then it made people feel like, well, now I'm just going to rebuy the whole collection. But then the other issue ran into, do you buy new Picard for 12 to 15 bucks, or do you buy old original Picard for 6 bucks on eBay? And that is something that I think that Nacelle is actively avoiding, which is a good thing. What was really nice to hear about in the article and from the panel is that Nacelle is planning to make multiple figures beyond this first wave, because we have had many a false start as Star Trek toy collectors. The most famous example being Playmates' recent line. We got one wave of live-action figures that shelf-warmed and clearanced, and one wave of Prodigy figures that didn't even make it to stores nor complete its main cast. We have Hia Toys making 4-inch and 6-inch figures for the Kelvin universe, but none of those have come out yet, and not a single one of those is a woman, which is frustrating because Uhura is, main cast. That line is supposedly they have a license for other Star Trek besides Kelvin, but how long until that actually happens? And then another example was Super 7's 7-inch scale TNG figures. While they were more expensive at $55 a piece as opposed to Nacelle's $30, they were doing the main cast, including Guinan, who gets very few figures, and they had Riker and Picard and a couple others. And that line died before they could finish the TNG cast, and they were going heavy hitters of TNG in a 7-inch scale on a model that had worked for other toy lines like Thundercats and Silverhawks. And the fact that Guinan couldn't get enough sales is concerning because it's Guinan. It's Whoopi Goldberg. And that is something that I worry about as well. So while me personally, I'm going to pick up the Nacelle figures, the question becomes, what is the overall collection going to look like? Are we going to avoid the heavy hitters, the ones that have been made forever? Or is in like Wave 3, we're going to get a TOS Kirk to kind of go, hey, we're making the mainstays as well? Because what I don't ultimately want is a collection of just guest stars and recurring characters. It would be nice to see the main cast as well. Though, like a lot of suggestions that they're looking for, main cast could be gray uniform Cisco or Janeway with the bob. There is options here with the characters we've gotten several times in looks that we haven't gotten in, just like we're doing with Captain Sulu. So I'm hoping to see that kind of mix in more of the heavy hitters as the line goes on, because I don't want the line to die off with just guest stars and one-off characters. So overall, I think that this line has a lot of potential and a lot of opportunity, though I am just worried about the viability, just because of how recent Star Trek lines have gone. Nothing has gotten up to the days of Playmates toys. Even Diamond Select couldn't get that far. So, and Diamond Select was just doing heavy hitters. So I'm hoping Nacelle has a plan. I hope they have it all figured out behind the scenes, and I hope that this line will be successful, because I really would love to see a Star Trek line succeed and get us a wide depth of characters, especially ones we've never had figures of before. But I think it's also important to also get figures of ones we've had before, but in the Nacelle style to go with those figures that we never had before. Now, this last section was some audience reaction on my live stream on Monday. My audience on my live streams typically are not Trekkies. Some of them are. A lot of them aren't hardcores. I'm like one of the most hardcore Trekkies that I know of. But my audience has a mix of people. Most of them collect toys. Most of them know of Star Trek. Some of them know Star Trek, and some of them are very picky with their Star Trek. So this is just some comments from that live chat. I wrote these down after the live stream, but I don't have anybody's names attached to them, so thank you to everybody that commented. But here's just some observations we had. So when we were going through the news itself and I was breaking down who each character was, I played a little game where I put the character up and then asked the chat, hey, do you guys recognize this character? And Jellicoe got some responses. Nobody knew Scotty's dead nephew. Nobody knew Valkyris. Tuvix got a response, which was, who would want a figure of Tuvix? Fair question. I'm apparently the one who does, because I would totally buy it. But it was kind of interesting. The mix of reactions is kind of like, you know, oh, Sulu, that's a great figure, especially if he comes with a teacup. That was a specific comment. Someone was like, I want Sulu if he comes with a teacup. And some of the other characters like Archer, people recognized Archer, thought it was weird it was Mirror Archer, but a lot were saying, yeah, they're probably going to make regular Archer anyways, that kind of stuff. I think the response was what I expected from, you know, non-Trekkies, and the response from Trekkies also was asking the question of who Valkyris is. So the line is really pulling deep and doing a lot of deep cuts, which is, you know, I think has its positives and negatives. Also, people were interested in the idea of a 6 to 7 inch scale Star Trek line. They were like, oh yeah, I'd pick up some figures from that. One in particular, Scotty's nephew, was pointed out as the one that several people said, I would pick that up to do a cool custom with it, or I'd pick that up just to have a cool spacesuit guy. I think that's kind of an interesting thing too, and maybe something that should be considered when deciding on picks of characters, is can their overall look sell to somebody who doesn't know who that character is? So that was kind of the way my audience reacted, and I thought it was a very interesting discussion, but I wanted to bring it up here to kind of get an outside perspective besides just super diehard Trekkie fan here. So ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm very excited for Nacelle's Star Trek line, like 100% on board with everything they've shown in terms of a fan. I hope that on the business side of things, this can last for several years, we get multiple ways, and we have the coolest Star Trek figure collection ever done. I would absolutely love to see that. And hopefully, when they kind of make their way through the original stuff, maybe they can re-up their contract with Paramount and get to do some of the more modern shows. The fact we have no Lower Decks action figures is an actual crime, and I think that it would be really cool to see something like that. I think this one has a lot of potential, and it seems to have the passion and the energy to do what has never been done before. Or in other words, boldly go where no toy company has gone before. And I like that idea a whole lot. So I look forward to seeing more of this. I hope we can cover more of this as news comes out. We'll definitely talk about it on our live streams, which are every Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern, if you're curious when we have those live streams. and I look forward to reviewing these figures in the future. I would love to take a look at these as soon as possible. So on that note, if you haven't hit the like button already, please hit the like button, hit subscribe and notification bell if you haven't already. Leave all your thoughts in the comments down below. What do you think of this line? What do you think of the character picks? What do you want to see from this line? Let's discuss it all down below. If you want to continue the conversation, join our Discord server in the link below. Got all kinds of cool Star Trek fans and other sci-fi stuff, all kinds of cool stuff. Also, you want to help support the channel directly, channel memberships will give you perks like early access to videos, member-exclusive live streams, and special shout-outs. Let's give some special shout-outs to our channel members. Special shout-out to all our channel members, including our Captain Tiers, Spin-54, Toma K, MasterBen95, Jamie's World, Forever1000, Clint Jorgensen, Kamen Jojo, Stephen Hino Josa, Muhammad Faiz Daniel, Dominator, Yash Gangater, R2 Wingo, Doge9789, Alex Alexis, Brendan Donnellan, Toast Rave, Brenton Yadden, Mr. Smelly Potato, GV2186, and Silver Bricks. Thank you all for your support. If you'd like to find me across social media, including Blue Sky, you can find me at Soundout12, though I am more active in our Discord server. You can find my awesome graphic designer on social media and Discord at DarkCloud643. And you can find Hero Club at hero-club.com for news, interviews, reviews, and more. And until next time, this is Soundout saying, live long and prosper.